The manager of my lake house called and asked why I was canceling a paid guest's reservation for my sister's honeymoon. I wasn't. My sister had told everyone. Mom and Dad already said yes, so I canceled her stay before she could turn a promise they had no right to make into my problem. You're hearing an original confession mode story. I was in a hotel parking lot 3 states away when the family group chat started celebrating a vacation I had never approved. My name is Evan. I was 38 then, and I supervised commercial heating and cooling projects. Most weeks I worked close to home. That week, a hospital renovation had pulled me to Ohio for 4 days, and I had just finished a 12-hour shift inside a mechanical room loud enough to make silence feel strange. I sat in my truck with the air conditioning running and opened a message from my younger sister, Natalie. She had posted a photograph of herself and her fiancé, Mason, holding champagne on a dock. The dock was mine. The picture had been taken the previous fall during a family weekend at my lake house. Under it, she had written, "Honeymoon solved. 12 days at Cedar Wake. Mom and Dad already said yes. Mason finally gets to see our lake place as family." My mother responded with 3 heart emojis. My father wrote, "One less thing for the bride to worry about." An aunt asked whether the newlyweds wanted groceries delivered before they arrived. Natalie answered that Mom was handling the refrigerator and Dad was checking the boat. I read the messages twice because there were several different problems packed into 4 lines. Cedar Wake was not our lake place. It was a small 3-bedroom cottage I had bought 5 years earlier with my own down payment and a mortgage in my name. My parents had helped me paint it and replace part of the dock. Natalie had spent some free weekends there. None of that gave any of them the right to reserve it. The second problem was the date. Natalie was getting married in a little over 2 weeks. Her 12-day honeymoon overlapped a 10-night reservation made by a family that had stayed at Cedar Wake the previous summer. They had signed the rental agreement in January and paid the required deposit. The third problem was that Natalie knew I used a local manager. If she had actually secured 12 days, someone had spoken to Irene without speaking to me. I typed, "Who approved these dates?" Natalie replied almost immediately. I literally said Mom and Dad. Dad handled it with Irene. "Please don't make this weird in front of everyone." I called Irene before answering. Irene Walsh ran Harbor Key Rentals from a converted gas station near the marina. She managed 19 cottages, including mine. She was practical, careful with records, and almost impossible to rush. That was why I had hired her. She picked up on the second ring. "I was about to call you," she said. "Did you give your father authority over the property?" "No." "Did you agree to host a wedding event?" "No." There was a short silence, followed by the sound of a keyboard. Irene said Mason had booked 3 nights through the public rental page in March. He used his own name, a different email address, and my mother's credit card. Those 3 nights were the only open gap after Natalie's wedding. Nothing in the reservation identified him as my future brother-in-law. The booking itself would not have bothered me. Family members had paid the normal rate before, and Mason had accepted the same rules as any guest. The problem began a week later, when Natalie wrote to Irene and said the 3-night reservation was supposed to be an owner stay lasting 12 days. Irene had told her the following 10 nights belonged to another family and could not be extended without the owner's approval. Natalie replied that Irene was confused. According to her, my father co-owned the property and had already approved moving the other guests to a nearby motel. She said any extra cost could be deducted from Evan's side of the lake account. There was no shared lake account. I asked Irene whether she had changed anything. "No," she said. "Your management agreement names one owner contact. You. But your father sent me a letter this afternoon calling himself the family representative. And your sister has a caterer asking where to unload tables. I need a direct instruction from you." Irene forwarded the message chain while we were speaking. The first email was from Natalie. It said the Brooks reservation had been made after her parents promised her the house, so the renters should be treated as a calendar mistake. It asked Irene to tell the Brooks family there had been a plumbing issue and place them in a motel 10 miles away. That detail mattered. Natalie was not merely asking me to choose family over income. She was asking my manager to lie to people who had a signed agreement. The next email was from my father, Frank. He wrote that Cedar Wake had always been a family project, that he had invested labor and materials, and that he was authorizing Natalie and Mason's extended use as a co-owner. Dad signed the message, Frank Dalton, family representative. The final attachment came from a caterer. It requested access on the afternoon after the wedding for a lakeside brunch with 22 guests. Cedar Wake's maximum overnight occupancy was 8. The old septic system and narrow shared road were 2 reasons the rental agreement prohibited parties. Natalie had called it a 12-day honeymoon in the family chat. In the emails, at least part of it was a second wedding event. I told Irene to preserve every message and leave the Brooks reservation exactly as it was. Then I made the first decision that changed the situation instead of extending the argument. Cancel Mason's 3-night reservation, I said. Issue a full refund to the card. Send the standard notice that the booking was canceled because the identity of the owner relationship, intended length of stay, and event plans were misrepresented. No penalty beyond the refund. Irene asked whether I was sure. The 3-night booking could still have been honored if Natalie abandoned the extension and the event. I had considered that during the call. If this had been one bad assumption, I might have offered exactly that compromise. It was not one assumption. Natalie had announced 12 days, asked the manager to remove contracted guests, invented my father's ownership, proposed a false plumbing excuse, and arranged a party before I knew any of it existed. I'm sure, I said. Please tell the caterer the owner has not authorized access. Don't discuss the family dispute. Just keep the property out of it. By the time I returned to the group chat, Irene had sent the cancellation. Natalie wrote, "What did you just do?" I answered, "I canceled the 3 nights Mason booked. The other 10 nights belong to paying guests. There will be no event at the house. Mom and Dad do not own it and cannot approve a stay." My mother called before the typing indicator disappeared. "Tell me this is a misunderstanding," she said. It was a misunderstanding until Dad told my manager he was a co-owner. Now it is in writing. Mom said nobody was trying to steal my house. They were trying to give Natalie one beautiful thing after a difficult year. The wedding budget had grown after the original venue closed, flights were expensive, and Mason had used most of his savings for the reception deposit. My parents believe I would want to help if they removed the awkwardness of asking. "You removed my ability to say yes," I said. "We knew you would focus on the rental calendar. There are people on that calendar. They are strangers." "Natalie is your sister." I asked whether she had read the email about moving those strangers to a motel and telling them the plumbing had failed. Mom paused, then said Dad had probably suggested the motel as a practical solution. She did not address the lie. I asked why Mason's booking used her credit card and a private email if everyone believed they had permission. Because Irene makes family do everything through that ridiculous website. Irene makes everyone sign the same agreement. That is her job. Mom's voice changed from explanation to warning. She said Natalie was already under enormous pressure and that I needed to restore the booking before she saw the cancellation. I told her Natalie had already seen it. "Then fix it before rehearsal dinner," she said. No, it was a small word, but my mother reacted as if I had shouted. She told me Dad and Natalie would call when I had calmed down. I said I was calm and had a 6 o'clock start the next morning. Then I ended the call. 10 minutes later, Natalie sent a screenshot of the refund notice to the group chat. "My brother just canceled my honeymoon because he would rather make money from strangers," she wrote. The chat became active faster than I could read it. My aunt called the decision cruel. A cousin offered his basement apartment, which Natalie ignored. Someone suggested the Brooks family could use my house later in the summer. Dad wrote that contracts could be changed when a family emergency mattered more. I did not defend myself in 20 separate messages. I posted one screenshot from the rental agreement showing the Brooks dates and the no event rule. I covered their names and payment information. Then I wrote, "The existing guests are not being displaced, and Cedar Wake is not hosting a 22-person event. The canceled reservation has been fully refunded. That is the final decision." I muted the chat and went back into the hotel. The next morning, there were 37 unread messages and a voicemail from my father. Dad did not begin with the wedding. He began with the dock. "You keep saying we own nothing," he said. "Who rebuilt the west section after the storm? Who spent 4 weekends painting that place? Who hauled out the rotten cabinets?" He had done all of those things. My mother had bought curtains and 2 used dressers. I had never denied it. When I bought Cedar Wake, it was structurally sound but ugly. The kitchen doors hung crooked, the deck had splinters, and the dock leaned toward the water. My parents volunteered to help because Dad enjoyed carpentry and Mom liked making lists. I paid the purchase price, mortgage, insurance, taxes, utilities, and major materials. Dad supplied some lumber and hardware without giving me receipts. In return, my parents used the house for 2 off-season weekends most years. Natalie joined them whenever she wanted. That arrangement had worked, because all of us understood it as family help followed by family hospitality. At least I thought we understood it. Dad now described the same weekends as an investment. "If you believe you paid for an ownership share," I said, "send me every receipt you have." "This isn't about receipts. You told my manager you were a co-owner because you invested materials. Send the receipts." He said I was reducing years of family effort to a transaction. "You turned it into a transaction when you used it to give away 12 days, I replied. Dad told me he would gather the records. Before hanging up, he said I should think carefully about whether one rental was worth changing my relationship with my only sister. I spent the drive home thinking about that question. The answer was no. One rental was not worth ending a family relationship. The rental was also not the reason the relationship was changing. The reason was that 3 people had built a plan around my property, hidden the details, and decided my eventual objection would be a personality defect rather than an answer. When I got home Thursday night, a thick cream envelope was waiting in my mailbox. It was Natalie's wedding invitation, even though I had received a save the date months earlier. Inside, she had added a handwritten note. "Bring the Cedar Wake key to rehearsal dinner. We can still put this behind us." Irene kept a working set of keys, and I had mine. My parents also had an old brass copy from the renovation years. Natalie apparently believed I could hand her 1 key and override a manager, a contract, and the guests arriving 4 days after the wedding. I photographed the note and saved it with the email chain. On Friday, Mason called me. I had met him perhaps a dozen times. He was quiet, worked for a regional bank, and usually left family debates to Natalie. I expected anger. Instead, he sounded embarrassed. He asked a direct question. "Does your dad own any part of the lake house?" "No." "Did your parents pay the down payment?" "No." "Did you tell Natalie she could have it after the wedding?" "No." She asked in February whether it might be available. I told her to send me the dates so I could check. She never sent them. Mason was silent long enough that I checked the call screen. Then he said Natalie had told him the property was a family investment that I managed because I lived closest to Irene. She said my parents had reserved the honeymoon as their wedding gift. Mason had allowed his name to be used for the 3-night booking because Natalie said it was the easiest way to enter their information into the guest system. He did not know about the Brooks family until the cancellation notice. I asked whether he knew about the brunch. He did. He thought the guest limit had been approved by my father. I told him Dad had no authority to approve it. I did not send Mason my mortgage statement or argue about the entire family history. I gave him the county property record link, which listed me as the owner, and forwarded the section of Irene's email addressing the existing booking and occupancy limit. Mason said, "I wish somebody had told me this before my parents paid the caterer." That sentence opened a new part of the problem. His parents had paid deposits for the brunch, a pontoon rental, and a photographer's morning session at Cedar Wake. Natalie had sent them photographs of the cottage and described the brunch as the last part of the wedding weekend. They believed the house belonged to my side of the family. I told Mason I had not approved any vendor and could not promise what their refund policies allowed. Irene would provide written confirmation that the property had never authorized the event if they needed it. He thanked me, which I did not expect. Then he asked whether there was any version in which they could keep the original 3 nights without the brunch or extension. It was a fair question that anyone in my family had asked. I considered it seriously. Before the email chain, probably, I said. After your reservation was used to get 12 days and remove another family, no. I don't trust Natalie or my parents to stop at 3 nights. The refund is already processed. Mason did not argue. He said he understood the answer even if he hated the timing. 20 minutes after our call, Natalie sent me a private message. You went behind my back to poison my fiancé against me. I replied, Mason called me. I answered his questions and sent him the ownership record. She accused me of humiliating her 2 weeks before the wedding. She said I was jealous because she was getting married while I was still single. Then she said the lake house should have been partly hers anyway because our parents had helped renovate it while she was finishing graduate school and could not contribute labor. That was the first time Natalie claimed her own share. I asked her how much she had paid toward the purchase, mortgage, taxes, insurance, repairs, or management. That's exactly who you are, she wrote. Everything has a price tag unless you are the one benefiting. I stopped answering. On Saturday, Dad emailed a spreadsheet. It listed purchases from the first year I owned Cedar Wake. Lumber, deck screws, paint, 2 ceiling fans, curtains, used furniture, gas for his truck, and an estimate of his labor at $40 an hour. The total was a little over $11,000. More than $7,000 of that was labor he had never billed or described as paid work. Gas estimates had no receipts. Several material purchases were items I remembered reimbursing at the time, but neither of us had kept complete records. Attached receipts supported $2,340 in purchases I could not show I had repaid. Dad wrote, "This is what family ownership looks like, whether the deed says it or not." I could have argued line by line. Instead, I called the attorney who had handled my purchase closing. I did not ask her to threaten my parents or declare them criminals. I asked what records I should keep when relatives who had volunteered renovation help were now describing themselves as owners. She told me not to debate ownership in group messages. The recorded deed and loan documents already identified the legal owner. She advised me to save the correspondence, keep management authority in writing, and avoid language suggesting that reimbursing a cost created or settled an ownership interest. If the claim escalated, we could address it formally. That conversation cost me less than an hour and removed my temptation to write a 10-page family rebuttal. I sent my parents a check for $2,340 with a copy of the supported receipts. In the accompanying letter, I said I was voluntarily reimbursing the documented purchases because I did not want unpaid materials used as leverage in future conversations. I did not pay invented wages, undocumented fuel, or items I had already reimbursed. I also ended the old access arrangement. After the current rentals were complete, Irene would have the exterior locks rekeyed. Future visits by any relative would require a normal reservation accepted through management. There would be no standing family key and no parent-approved owner stays. The reimbursement hurt. Cedar Wake produced income, but it also carried a mortgage, repairs, and seasonal gaps. Sending more than $2,000 just before a roof inspection was not symbolic. It meant postponing the replacement of my truck and moving money out of the emergency account. It was still cheaper than allowing every past favor to become a vote over my property. Dad called after receiving the letter. "You think a check erases what we did for you?" "No. I appreciated the help. I don't appreciate you converting it into ownership when Natalie wants the house." He said the check was insulting and would not be deposited. "Then tear it up," I said. The cancellation still stands. Dad told me not to attend the rehearsal dinner unless I was prepared to apologize and restore the 3-night stay. He said the wedding needed supportive people, not someone collecting evidence against the bride. I looked at the invitation on my kitchen counter. "Are you telling me I'm not welcome?" "I'm telling you the choice is yours." It was a familiar family sentence. A demand was presented, then the consequence was assigned to whoever refused it. "Then I won't attend," I said. My mother called an hour later and said Dad had spoken in anger. She offered a compromise. Natalie and Mason could use Cedar Wake for the original 3 nights. The brunch would move, the extension would disappear, and my parents would return the key afterward. 2 weeks earlier, I might have accepted that. Now the offer required me to trust the same people who had lied to Irene, Mason, his parents, the vendors, and the extended family. It also came only after every attempt to force the larger plan had failed. I said no. Mom began crying. She said there would be photographs without me and relatives asking why Natalie's only brother stayed away. I told her she could answer honestly. Dad made my attendance conditional on surrendering the house, and I declined. "You know we can't say that at a wedding," she said. "Then don't discuss me at the wedding." The week before the ceremony, the pressure became less dramatic and more practical. The caterer refunded part of the brunch deposit but kept an administrative fee. The photographer moved this session to a public garden. The pontoon company retained 1 day's deposit because the cancellation came late. Mason books 2 rooms at a chain hotel 40 minutes from the lake, 1 for the wedding night and 1 for the following 2 nights. None of those consequences came from me calling vendors. Irene sent 1 factual confirmation to each company that contacted her. Cedar Wake had not authorized an event or access. The people who signed those contracts handled the rest. Natalie continued telling relatives that I had destroyed a free honeymoon over greed. She left out the refund, the existing guests, and the event. A cousin posted that family should matter more than a vacation rental business. I almost replied with the emails. Publicly exposing every message would have felt satisfying for 5 minutes and created a new argument lasting months. Instead, I sent the cousin 1 sentence. A 10-night guest contract and a prohibited 22-person event were already in place when I learned about the plan. He did not respond. Mason called once more 3 days before the wedding. He said he and Natalie were still getting married. He did not ask me to change my decision. He wanted me to know that he had told his parents the house was mine and that the deposits had been arranged without my approval. "They're angry," he said. I asked whether they were angry at me. "Not mainly." That was all he said. I wished him a peaceful wedding day. I meant it. Wanting my boundary respected did not require hoping their marriage failed before it began. On the afternoon of the wedding, I was at home replacing a loose hinge on a kitchen cabinet. My phone stayed face down on the counter. At 6:30, the family chat filled with photographs. Natalie looked happy. Mason looked nervous in some pictures and relaxed in others. My parents stood beside them as if the previous 2 weeks had not happened. There was an empty place where I would have been in the sibling photograph. I did not pretend that felt good. I had chosen not to attend under the condition Dad imposed, but choices can be correct and still cost something. The following morning, Irene called from Cedar Wake. The Brooks family had arrived for their 10-night stay. They had no idea a wedding dispute had taken place around their reservation. The cottage was clean, the dock was open, and their 2 children were already fishing. Irene asked whether I wanted her to keep an eye out for Natalie. "Handle the house the way you handle any occupied rental," I said. "No special confrontation. Call me only if someone actually arrives and refuses to leave." No one arrived. Natalie and Mason spent 3 nights at the hotel, then drove home. Their honeymoon was shorter and less impressive than the one posted in the group chat, but it happened. The Brooks family completed their stay and left the property in good condition. Irene released their deposit on schedule. That mattered to me because it closed the first promise I had made in the entire mess. People who booked my house honestly got the house they booked. My parents deposited my reimbursement check 11 days after the wedding. Dad did not acknowledge it. Mom mailed their brass key to me in a padded envelope with no note. Irene had already scheduled the rekey, so returning it did not restore access or trust. It did tell me they understood the old arrangement was finished. For the rest of the summer, communication stayed limited to email. Natalie sent 1 long message accusing me of choosing contracts over blood. She said every family has informal understandings, and that I had used technical ownership to humiliate her when a generous brother would have found a way. I read the message carefully because part of it was true. Families do rely on informal understandings. My parents had helped me. I had let them use the house without paperwork. I had benefited from their time. The informal understanding I remembered was that they were guests I loved, not owners whose permission replaced mine. Generosity stopped being generosity when it became a debt another person could collect without asking. I answered Natalie once. "You could have asked after I told you to send the dates." Instead, You hid the booking, extended it over another family's contract, planned an event, and told people Dad owned the house. I canceled the stay because I could not trust the limits you agreed to. I will not debate that decision again. She replied that I would regret missing her wedding longer than she regretted losing the lake house. She may be right about the first part. I still dislike seeing that empty space in the photographs. Regret, however, is not the same as believing I should have handed over the key. In October, after the rental season slowed down, I spent a weekend at Cedar Wake by myself. The house looked almost exactly as it had before the argument. Dad's repaired section of dock was still solid. Mom's curtain still hung in the front bedroom. I had not needed to erase their work to end their claim over it. I walked through the manager's binder on the kitchen counter. The new access policy listed Irene and Mia as the only people authorized to approve reservations, cancellations, vendor access, or events. Family members were treated like any other prospective guest. It was less warm than the old arrangement and much clearer. There had been no secret deed change, no courtroom victory, and no dramatic scene at the wedding. I canceled a reservation, kept an existing promise, paid back the documented money my parents could reasonably point to, and accepted that they might choose Natalie's version of the story anyway. The family chat still exists, but I no longer participate. Mason sends a brief holiday message once in a while. Natalie and I have not spoken since that summer. My mother has asked twice whether we can all start fresh without discussing the house. I have told her a fresh start would require acknowledging what happened, not pretending the cancellation created it. Cedar Wake remains mine, along with the mortgage, tax bill, repair calls, empty winter weeks, and every other responsibility nobody mentioned when they called it a family property. The next time someone stays there, it will be because I agreed, not because my parents said yes on my behalf. If your sister planned her honeymoon in a house you owned and your parents promised it without asking, would you cancel the stay or let it happen once and end family access afterward?